when you hear it said that sentient beings are worthy of love and compassion because they're the cause or they're the source of our awakening, or they're a necessary ingredient for our awakening. Is that something that you believe? Let your mind roam through the various kinds of sentient beings there are in the different realms. And do you really think that each of them is worthy of love and compassion? Because they factor into your awakening. Or they're the source of your awakening. And what about those awful, frightening looking beings? Human beings who are completely uncontrolled, worse than animals in terms of their behavior. Or living beings in other realms who are very aggressive. Are they worthy of love and compassion? Because they're the source of your awakening. If you say, no, they're not the source of my awakening, my becoming a Buddha is something completely unrelated to them, then what is the source of your awakening? Or if you say, yes, they are a source of my awakening, but that doesn't mean they're worthy of love and compassion, then how do you put those two things together in your mind? That they're the source of your awakening, but they aren't worthy of any respect or any kind of positive feelings from your side. How do you put those two together? And if you say, yes, they are the source of my awakening, and they are worthy of love and compassion, but only when they do what I like, then where does that leave you? So try for a moment just to say, yes, they're the source of my awakening, and yes, they are worthy of love and compassion, and to open your heart and mind to feel that. And then think, I will progress and create the causes for full awakening for the sake of those beings. That's my responsibility for them, towards them. So what do you think? You think sentient beings are worthy of love and compassion? But really only when they do what we want, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe we can get ourselves to the point where, yeah, they're involved in our awakening, and yeah, so they're kind of worthy of love and compassion. But they have to fulfill a criteria from their side. My love and compassion don't come freely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I stand at a little door and they have to come and, say all the nice things they've done towards me, and then I will give them a little love and compassion in return. So every day they have to come and check in. Sorry, no love and compassion for you today. You scolded me. You didn't do your chores. You didn't do what I wanted. Yeah. Sorry, come back tomorrow. Be nice to me tomorrow, and then you'll earn my love and compassion. Yeah? I mean, shouldn't people have to earn our love and compassion? Aren't we suckers? Did we just give it away freely? Oh, I love you no matter what you do. Do you really feel that? Towards all those idiots who know what they should do to do it right, and they don't do it. Yeah? And if you've told them one time, you've told them 1,000 times, and they just don't listen. Make flashcards. No. Who made this program that tells me to make flashcards when I don't want them? Okay. Okay, choosing your debate partner for this course. So remember, what are the qualities of a good debate partner? Rational thinking. Integrity. And willing to admit they're wrong. Do you have those 3 qualities? Are you going to make a good debate partner?
Sometimes. Working on it.
Rational. Are you rational? How often is that? Yeah. Do we have integrity? Are we willing to admit we're wrong? Never. Only suckers admit they're wrong. We're in the party of Trump, and we're going to make everything be a victory for us. I mean, he practices great thought training, this guy. Yeah? Really? You know? He knows how to change everything so that it becomes a victory for him. Yeah? Anything. He transforms it. Even, if he lost something or whatever, or humiliated, everything becomes a victory for him that becomes support for what he's saying. Yeah, so we should practice thought training like that too. Yeah, except transform it so it goes in the path. Yeah. But have you ever looked at what he said?
It doesn't even make them happy though. There's something wrong.
But he wins all the time, and he's always right. Wouldn't you like to always win? Yeah, we're supposed to get sick of winning, aren't we? Yeah? Because too much winning. So, we're not going to give up. Who wants too much winning? I want too much winning. Okay, choosing your debate partner for this course. The first priority is to choose someone with whom you will be able to find times when you can talk together. Okay, so we're in silent retreat. That means we have a lot of time to talk to each other. Yeah, because nobody else is talking and interrupting us. Yeah, isn't it? We're in silence, so there's nobody talking, so we have plenty of time to go talk to a debate partner. Okay, you see what I mean about thought training? And twisting everything to your advantage? It is best if you can speak face to face. If not, you can converse over the phone. Another guideline is to choose someone to work with who doesn't have too many distractions and who doesn't cause too many distractions in you. Okay, that is, try and find someone you can work with so that you will both stay on task. That sounds easy, huh? Okay, so then the caption under the picture of the challenger stands and asks questions, mainly through giving arguments following up on the sitting defender's positions. The defender lays out a position by interpreting passages or phrases from texts, giving answers for comparisons of phenomena, giving subjects for debate, justifying stated positions with reasons, and responding to the challenger's arguments with any of several answers. Okay, so the defender is seated, the challenger is standing. He also, there's a note here too, probably because the preferred place for debating year-round is outside. He hasn't been to the Abbey. The debating courtyard is thought of as a place on which rather than in which debate takes place. In this sense, it is more like an athletic field on which competition takes place, or a stage on which there is a performance that an enclosure, such as a room or an auditorium, in which events take place. Okay, so you can go on the landing, and on the landing, where you're not in a building, then you can debate. Yeah, and shiver at the same time. Okay. So then the 16, chapter 16, Challengers and Defenders. The style of reasoning and debate presented here assumes that, at least in theory, a debate takes place between one challenger and one defender. This measure of discipline, setting up the two roles and then staying within them for the duration of the debate, is essential to allow debates to proceed. If there were no agreed-upon guidelines, soon we would just decline into arguing and fighting. True, isn't it? Yeah. Then it would be hard to reach any conclusions. Buddhist debate shares this need for procedure and constraint with every organized system of disputation. Okay? So this is a very interesting point, that there's got to be ground rules and a structure, and people have to stay within that structure in order to have a debate. Because if you don't stay within that structure, then I say this, and you disagree and say that, and I disagree with what you say, and we're mutually challenging each other, and we're mutually trying to defend our own positions, or rather ignoring the other person's challenge to our position and challenging them back, but then they ignore our challenge and challenge us back, and then it devolves into an argument. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Or it's a fight. It's what happens when people fight, isn't it? Yeah. And they talk over each other, they talk by each other, and it's very difficult to come to any conclusion because they're not staying within a structure that has a specific point and specific rules. Okay, and what's very interesting between human beings is usually it starts out as a discussion, and it's usually over some situation or some external thing. And then very soon, if you watch, it goes, normal fights or arguments go from the issue stops being the external situation, and it starts being the process of how you communicate. Okay? So, my famous the argument of the peanut butter, Okay, so the husband and wife, or the husband and husband, or the wife and wife, or the partners, or you and your cat, whoever it is, you're sitting at the breakfast table, and one says, where's the peanut butter? Oh, I don't know. I guess we don't have any. Well, you were the one who went to the store this week to get the to get the groceries. Didn't you get it? No, I don't think it was on the list. Well, I put it on the list, and so what's up? Are you just forgetful, or no? I remember everything. It just wasn't on the list, and you need to make the list better. Okay, so right at that point, it stops being about the peanut butter, and it starts being an attack on the other person. You need to make the list better. And then this person goes to, you're always telling me what to do. If you don't like what I do, you do it yourself. Okay. And then this one says, no, sorry, you got it all wrong. You're the one who's bossing me around all the time. And, you just make up things as they come along. No, I don't make up things. The peanut butter was on the list, and you're passive aggressive, and you knew I wanted it, and you didn't get it. What are you doing calling me passive aggressive? It's you. You have your own emotional problems that you've been to the psychiatrist with for 3 countless great eons, and why are you blaming them on me? Well, you're going to the coach too, and they're talking about your problem. So you see, it started out on peanut butter, and then it turned into a quarrel over how they are communicating. That you're bossing me around, what you do is not, sensible. You're not giving the whole list properly on time. I can't read your handwriting. Pretty soon, the argument is not about the peanut butter pretty soon. It's about the process in which they communicate. And that is actually much more touchy for people in a very close relationship. Peanut butter, there's no peanut butter. You need peanut butter. You go to the store and get peanut butter. Yeah? But what's the underlying issue, what the peanut butter represents, is, do you respect me? Do you care about me? Are you taking the time to communicate with me, or do you just take me for granted? Are you bossing me around? And so it's really about, the argument becomes about the relationship. But they still think it's about the peanut butter. Yeah, and it's not. It's about the relationship and how are we talking to each other. Okay, so you start out, then what you have is multiple issues, that the people are quarreling about. So just be aware of this sometimes, when you have something going on with somebody. Yeah, what's the issue it starts out with, and where does it go? Yeah. And then when you see how it just explodes into a totally different subject, which is no longer being discussed, but it's people tossing accusations. And the more heated the discussion gets, the more extravagant the accusations are. They get so exaggerated, which push the buttons of the other person. And then, somebody feels really backed into a corner, so they come out with a threat. Yeah, that escalates it one notch up, Okay. And, so that's how fights occur when there's no rules and when people are agitated. So in a debate, you're trying to really stay on point with the topic, because you're trying to understand the nature of reality. You're not trying to understand whether that person is passive aggressive. Okay? Yeah. What's the nature of reality? And the state of their sanity or insanity is not the issue, and it really doesn't matter. Okay? Traditionally in Tibet and in India before, the vast majority of debaters were monks. But in recent years, the Tibetans have made tremendous progress in including and supporting nuns too in the practice of debate. Nowadays, there is also a movement toward teaching debate outside the communities of monks and nuns to laypersons as well. So this has all happened under His Holiness's guidance. So this is 18. So in 2016, there was the first batch of Geshe-mas, 20 of them. 2017, there were 6 more. And then 2018, we just have 10 new ones. One of them is Dawa Chuzam, one of the nuns who came to the Abbey a few years ago. Okay, so she is now a Geshe. Yeah, and at the IBD, the Buddhist, the Dialectic School, Institute of Buddhist Dialectics in Dharamsala, now they have nuns studying there, and they have lay people studying there. Okay, so that's a big change. When I first went to Dharamsala, there was one nun there, pretty lonely for her, and no lay people at IBD. So a lot of changes happened. Upon first seeing Tibetan monks or nuns debating, what fascinates and intrigues everyone is the performance of the person in the role of challenger, because the challenger is standing, does most of the talking, sometimes shouts. This is how the monks debate. The women, are much more demure if you watch them debate. Okay, sometimes shouts, and every few moments claps loudly. The challenger is called the one with the path of reasoning, for the challenger's job is to attack the defender's stated position, mainly by drawing out the logical consequences of what the defender is saying, and forming arguments that oppose the defender's position, right or wrong. The defender is called the one defending a thesis, for the defender's job is to put forth a sensible position which the defender believes is correct, and then defend that position by responding to the challenger's questions and arguments. Okay, so very specific kind of roles and purposes in each role. People always wonder why the debaters are so animated. What could possibly have stirred them up so much? Well, first of all, most of them are young men with a lot of energy. And they can't go out and play basketball and football and soccer. And so debate is an excellent way to have them use that energy. Yeah, it's really quite skillful. Badminton does not cut it. Okay. Okay. What could possibly have stirred them up so much? To an outsider who does not know what they are saying, it seems as if the debaters, especially the challenger, might even be angry about something. It sort of looks like an argument. Now, when challengers speak loudly, clasp their hands in the defenders' faces, demand responses, and scold and mock the defenders when they don't reply quickly or when they give a bad answer. Okay, sometimes they even push each other. You can see all this without understanding the language. However, this is just normal behavior in debate. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, how many of you seen them in India debate? Yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing when they get into it. I mean, they will push somebody, one challenger, it's like, get out of the way, I want to debate with this guy, pushes him away, then starts screaming at the defender, and, and especially leans over him and point their fingers and ask them questions like this, and screams in their face, okay? And then somebody comes, pushes that person away, and then they're all talking at once, and they talk very fast. Yeah, and you have to think fast and answer fast. And you have to have very good hearing and the ability to focus, because you're in this yard where everybody else is screaming at each other, debating, So everybody around you is doing this, and you have to focus on your debate, because they talk so fast that if you space out for a minute and miss something, you're gone. You can't catch up. Okay, what they are supposed to be, sometimes they do get angry, of course, but that is not what they are supposed to be doing. What they are supposed to be doing is working towards developing wisdom in order to achieve liberation, and they are supposed to help each other along this process. If realization and liberation were easy, we would likely see it more frequently. However, supposing it is possible at all, some effort would be required. The goal is clear knowledge, and remember that the two types of reliable cognizers are called incontrovertible, meaning non-reversible, because the insights are final. Okay. So the debaters are animated in challenging each other and in defending their positions. Yeah. So ideally, you don't have any ego involvement. This is just a position, and you're debating it because you're trying to get to the truth. Sometimes, however, like regular human beings, you get really attached to your position, and you're not going to give up, or you're going to find some way to distract what the other guy's doing, or lead them down a wrong way, or you feel embarrassed sometimes because you realize your own argument is at a dead end and you've lost, and you feel really embarrassed because your first position, you didn't do it very well. Yeah, so a lot of emotion does come up during it. And, the debate, the lamas who teach the debate classes, they will talk to the monks about that too. And especially if there's somebody who's very good at debate, who starts, putting their nose in the air a little bit because they can think very quickly and get everybody tangled around, and so they get a little bit conceited, then usually the teacher will chop them off, and also their classmates will too, and mock them or make fun of them, or do something to humiliate them. And this is done to really help the other person, because if somebody is smart and they get uppity about it, that doesn't help that person at all in their practice. So the debaters are animated in challenging each other and in defending their positions. And of course, they use every trick in the book, just like every other pair of disputants all over the world. Whether the defender is giving right answers or wrong ones, the challenger will not affirm them. Okay? In fact, challengers will deny the defender's answers, even if they are correct sometimes, and draw on their powers of persuasion and skill in debate to trick, test, and befuddle the defender. Yeah, and so I've heard of this happening, that a really good debater can talk somebody else into accepting a position that is completely illogical. Yeah, because they're very skilled at how they put arguments and so forth together. Just like other debaters around the world and lawyers in courtrooms, sometimes they just want to win the debate. But the ideal is to work together to develop a liberating, clear view of reality that is solid and incontrovertible. If a defender withdraws from a correct position because of qualms posed by a clever challenger, then that defender's understanding was not solid. Okay? So if you start out and what you're saying is correct, and then you begin to doubt it and take it up, it shows that, you didn't really understand it well because you couldn't defend it. Further, there's a strong tradition in debate of leaving people to figure it out on their own. Teachers do that with confused students. Oh boy, do they. And challengers do that with confused defenders. That is, very often a challenger, and sometimes even teachers, will leave a student with questions. They will point out inconsistencies in their position, but will not sit down and explain the answers. Sometimes this is to give the defenders a chance to reach their own understanding, and sometimes it is because the challenger too does not know the answer, but is able to express the problem. Thus, one reason the debaters are so animated is that they are passionate about the learning. They are good students involved in verbal combat, and it is an article of their faith for which they have some evidence that learning will advance them on the spiritual path. They believe that wisdom is liberating and that this life is an opportunity to develop it. Never forget, for the monks and nuns of Tibet, debate is a spiritual practice. Often in Western countries, we have a notion that religious practice is separate from intellectual inquiry, but in Tibetan Buddhism, this is definitely not the case. Okay? So this thing about getting you really confused and then leaving it, I've seen that with my teachers. I mean, we don't do the debate in the classes because we're all English speakers. But Geshe Tsunna mentioned, oh my goodness, when we were studying, Majjhimika Avatara, he would get us so confused. Yeah, because we'd ask him a question and he'd say, well, this and that. And it's like, what? And he'd have us going around like this, everybody in the class. And then he'd just kind of sit and laugh, and he wouldn't tell us the answers at all. Yeah. It was like, you go and think about it, and you figure it out yourself. Yeah. And Geshe Tongpa Tekchok used to do that too. Sometimes, yeah. And we would just, because we're very lazy students, yeah. So we ask the teacher the question, and the teacher does all the work and knows the answer and tells us. And that way we don't need to think about it. Yeah, we just ask the teacher. So we're quite lazy as students. But in the Tibetan education system, you can't be lazy. They turn it right back to you, and you're the one who has to think about it. Mm-hmm. And you'll go back and say, well, blah, 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 and then they'll go, oh, yeah, and they'll really kind of test you to see if you understand your own argument really well. Mm-hmm. The monks and nuns have joined a community that is wholly designated to nurture members in their spiritual growth. As Thupten Jinpa Langri, who was a monk of the Shartse College of Ganden Monastic University, said in his recollections of his years of study and debate, the debating courtyard is the classroom. And that's really true. They say that you learn a little bit from your teachings, your teacher, but most of what you learn is from debate. Okay? Of course, the monks and nuns will gather with their teachers and will study on their own, but the main learning takes place on the debating courtyard, where they develop a clarity of understanding. Essentially, they are learning from each other. As in every classroom, at least in every classroom where the students are passionate about learning, they are watching each other. One of the qualities of a class of debaters is that they all have a sense not only of their own abilities, but also the abilities of every other student in the class. Because they debate with each other, so they know, who is sharp and who isn't. In this regard, debate classes are like foreign language classes, for everyone fully displays their strengths and their weaknesses. You cannot hide when you have to agree to be in a community where someone is about to challenge you and clap their hands in your face. And it's true, You're sitting down there and somebody's standing up and they just lean over and, pan, like that. Or, especially when they lean over and point their finger and, lecture you, talking a million miles a minute. This is part of the discipline they share. They are watching each other and they give support to each other. Yeah. In the setting of a monastery or nunnery, this always goes on. It is what we call a fishbowl. We know that, don't we? A small community in which we all have to live together, like it or not. What's more, these are communities with shared rules and agreements governing behavior, so they watch each other for many reasons. They watch each other in the classroom of debate, encouraging and challenging each other, keeping the bar high. And when someone is weak and not trying, they will eventually ignore that person and move on. This is another reason why they are so animated in debate. The community supports it. They are not faking it. They are not posing. They are sincere. In the old days in Tibet, every monk learned how to read and write. That is not accurate. I'll finish the paragraph and then talk about that. These days in exile, the tradition has become that monks and nuns are all expected to study through the collected topics. After that, only the better students continue on. Okay, in old Tibet, every monk learned how to read and write? No, they learned how to read. Not all of them learned how to write. And the reason why was because if you learned how to write, then you could get tapped by the government to go and work for the government and become a writer, recording all the things that need to be written for the government. So if you wanted to stay in the monastery and get your education, you deliberately did not learn to write. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I've seen this with some of my teachers. Their handwriting looks like a child's because they didn't practice handwriting like we all had to practice handwriting. And they don't know how to spell. And to spell Tibetan is very difficult because there's so many silent letters. And so I would be with my teachers who are, incredible scholars, and they can't spell when they go to write something, And this was because in old Tibet, you could get tapped to go work in the government administration if you knew how to write. Okay, now I think they're encouraging people more to learn to write. Everybody learns to read, but now I think they're encouraging writing more. Although I can't say I see a lot of pieces of paper around the monastery with, notebooks where they're making letters. You know how you have to practice when you're little writing things. I don't remember seeing a lot of those.
I didn't know this, but we, the Abbey, donated copybooks and pens for a group of Ladakhi little girl nuns who were staying at Tosamling for the winter. So they were having to practice their handwriting. Yeah,
very good. Yeah. I mean, now that's really important that they learn to write as well. Yeah. Because also now I think they realize that to keep Tibetan culture alive, the language is very important. And if you can only read and you can't write your own language, it's difficult to preserve the language. And if you don't preserve the language, your cultural identity is going to slip.
In old Tibet, weren't there situations where there was a teacher who had a few students and it was all just oral? Where people were just being taught things verbally
Yeah.
and now nobody was learning to write?
Yeah. Well, also, nobody takes notes. All your learning is oral. Remember the other day I was saying, that if we were in Tibet, the whole layout of the classroom would look different? Nobody would have tables. When you go as a Tibetan to study, you don't have a table in front of you. You have all your prayers memorized. Okay, so whatever recitations there are, by heart. You don't take notes. Yeah, and you have to really concentrate and remember what the teacher said. And if the teacher's talking about 10 points, you have to focus and be able to remember those 10. Yeah. So it's very, very much oral learning. Yeah. Of course, you have your text, so sometimes you may take the text in with you and read along, when they're explaining the text. And when you go back to your room, you can review what the text said. But, it's very much oral. And also, you're all sitting together very tight. You don't have your own little space between you, so let alone no tables. There's like no space to stretch out your legs either. Yeah, everybody's just packed in. And he said everybody studies through collected topics, and only after that the better students continue on. I don't know. They only do the 3 years of Tibet collected topics. That's not so much. I know a lot of people, they do the Parchen, the Abhisamaya Alankara, and they do the Majjhimika. And then after that, they, and it has some Pramnavartika in it too. And then after that, many of them stop. They don't go on for the Vinaya and the Abhidharma classes. So it depends on the person. But probably through, after you get done with collected topics, by then whether this system of education is for you or not. Yeah. And like I said last time, I think it'd be really good if they had alternative styles of education for the people for whom this was not suitable. On first impression, it seems that the role of the challenger is more difficult because the challenger has to say so much more than the defender. Yeah, that's true, because the defender, sometimes just grunts, duh, mayo, duh. Yeah, they only have like 4 things you can say as a defender. Yeah, but so the challenger is, talking a lot. However, what the challenger has to say is guided by the defender's responses. And once you learn the basic techniques for the challenger's role, knowing what to say is pretty straightforward. So I think we get into that after a few chapters here. The challenger is required only to give fair consequences of what the defender is saying. And if that is not done, the challenger is not held personally responsible. And if that is done, the challenger is not held personally responsible for the content of the statements. Thus, the challenger's role is in general the easier one, because even without a firm understanding of the topic, it is still possible to proceed and look for apparent inconsistencies in the defender's positions. Okay, so the structure of when you have put forth a syllogism and then you have to check if the syllogism is correct, the structure is very set out, and so if there's a blink or a click in any of those things, then it's very easy for the challenger to point that out and take it away. So the challenger doesn't win or lose the debate. They're doing what challengers do. They challenge what the defender said, and the defender's trying to maintain what they said. The truth is that the role of the defender is more difficult because it is the defender who has to establish a sensible position and then give quick responses to defend that position. What's more, the defender is bound to the position personally, charged with giving accurate answers and held accountable for them. Yeah, so the challenger, can kind of say whatever they want. They don't have to believe it, but the defender has to, defend that position. As evidence that the defender's role is harder, students proceed through the program of studies, passing from one class to the next, by taking an exam in the role of defender before the assembled community. That is how they demonstrate control of the material and readiness to pass to the next level. When a student is being examined before passing to a higher class, any of the classmates may challenge the candidate on topics they have just completed in their class. When a person sits in the role of defender for the final examination for the Geshe degree, any debater, from the newest to the most accomplished, may challenge the examinee on any topic covered in the entire how many years of program of studies. Okay? So, they'll get up there and push somebody away and, start debating something that you studied 10 years ago. So you have to really be up on everything. One person who brings a unique insight to the actual practice of debate in the Tibetan monasteries is George Dreyfus, who was the first Westerner to earn the Geshe degree. He was born in Switzerland, spent 15 years studying Buddhism through debate in India at Sarajay Monastery, and then moved on to, then disrobed and received a PhD from the University of Virginia. He said of debating in the role of defender, and this is his quote, "The great thing that one can learn in debate is to be willing to expose one's ideas and to admit that one is wrong. That does not mean wondering and wavering. It means being open to the possibility of being wrong and yet being able to maintain a strong, well thought out, well argued opinion." Okay, so it's two things in there. Yeah, you're open to being wrong, but you're also dedicated to laying out something that makes sense. The emphasis on learning to hold a position against the assertion of others does not mean that all debaters are learning precisely the same things, nor does it mean that they are just learning an accepted dogma that is to be defended against all possible objections. Rather, debate is an intense and imaginative critical analysis. The debaters learn to make their own conclusions and to check their own and others' assertions for sense and consistency. Of course, there is guidance for an interpretation of the material. They rely on the great texts and commentaries of India, the works accepted by their own colleges, the oral instructions from their teachers. But ultimately, the understanding is always individual and personal. As George Dreyfus said in regard to the balance between learning the system and independent thought, in the monastery, the validity of the tradition is presupposed, and although it can be questioned, it cannot really ever be seriously questioned. And that's true, it's like you can debate, but you can question certain things, but there are certain questions that you just do not ask, because it's very much presupposed that the tradition is reliable. It's been around for centuries, they've debated it before, that's all worked out. So, you don't debate some of the, some points, you don't bring them up. Okay, but there is in the tradition, especially in debate, an element of critical inquiry in which you constantly submit your ideas to the possibility of being undermined. That is what debate is about. Yeah? Now, do you feel comfortable about submitting your ideas to the possibility that somebody's going to rip them to shreds? Yeah. So this is, one of the qualities to study debate, that you have to be willing to do that. Mhm. Each debater may be learning the same things that others have learned before, but the reliable cognition of those objects of understanding is only to be found in each debater's own consciousness. The new original thought that is the goal of debate is the dawning of new understanding in your own mind. Okay? So, the new original thought, that's the purpose of debate, is that you understand what the great masters of the past have been talking about, not that you come up with your own novel idea. Yeah. There have been people who have come up with their own novel ideas. You'll hear people talk about Gendon Chappell, and he lived middle of last century, early part of, the kind of, around the middle of last century. And he was apparently quite brilliant, and he went to India, and he was very good at debate, really excelled. But he questioned a lot of things that you weren't supposed to question. And so many people didn't like him, because he was, questioning some of those things. And some of his personal behavior was a bit off, too. So he was, to put it mildly. So, so he was quite controversial when he was alive. What I've noticed is that Westerners are very, very interested in Gendon Chappell, because I think we all have this element of, rebelling against the system and not wanting to conform to the system. And here's somebody who did it. So it destroyed him. What do you mean?
I only read the one bio, so I'm not an expert on this at all. But I had read some of his poetry, and I was very interested to read him,
Mm-hmm.
to read the story. But because he was so in his time, the respect has come after him.
Mm-hmm.
During his time, he was really increasingly reviled, and then he kind of lost his mind, and he turned to drink. He became an alcoholic. He was and died poverty stricken, and as an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
unable to function even in his own community.
Yeah.
So for all the glory, then to find out that this is how he turned out. And that was really fomented a lot by the society around him. So his own mind couldn't bear it, and the society really went
his
after
own
him.
mind couldn't bear the rejection by society.
Whatever that was. Whatever the aspect. Whatever the alcohol did, whatever his own brilliance did, whatever his own craziness did, all of that, but also how much he was kind of pecked at like
Mm-hmm.
the turkeys. It was horrible.
Yeah. But he also he fought back. He fought back, and he could have stayed in India, but he chose to come back to Tibet. Yeah. But it is sad how he eventually degenerated. Kind of a brilliant mind that. Okay, if debate were just repetition, then the disputants would not be able to garner a great deal of enthusiasm for the process of the debate, because they would know the outcome beforehand. However, debates follow their own course, guided by the defenders' answers and the challengers' counter-arguments. Because they are not pre-planned but are made fresh, the debaters remain passionate about the undertaking. Even long after the studies are completed, the enthusiasm for debate still remains. Often when discussing a topic of debate, an old geshe's eyes will light up and he will once again become animated. Yeah. So the monks I know who have completed the program, they all love the program. The ones who didn't complete it, clearly it wasn't for them. But the ones who did, they loved it, and they really saw the value of it. As you can see in many images, it is not only in theory that a debate takes place between that it is only in theory that a debate takes place between one challenger and one defender. In actual practice on the debating courtyard, the debaters may start out that way, two by two. But then as the session wears on, especially in the open-ended evening sessions, the debaters begin to gather into larger groups. When two debaters are engaged in a particularly interesting debate, naturally others gather around to listen in. Then, because they are all active debaters, some who agree with the reasoning of that the challenger is laying down will join in, clapping and shouting arguments at the defender, sometimes even pushing the others out of the way because they think they have a better argument to oppose the defender. And you can really see that, it's these young boys, young men with so much energy, and it's like, whoa, get out of the way. The evening debates are like that. And it's very skillful having it in the evening and so animated because nobody falls asleep. Yeah, so you can make use of all those hours, in a virtuous way, whereas we meditate in the evening and then start falling asleep during the meditation sessions. One time, when we were at Tashi Lungpo, you remember when we were waiting for His Holiness to come, then they had some people debating up in front, and it got to such an extent with them pushing each other that somebody had to step in and make an announcement and say, okay, you have to line up, and, and kind of, yeah, because they were all pouncing and pushing and screaming. Yeah. More than once, in the intellectual passion of the young, these pushing matches have become more physical and less scholarly. Also, on the other side, sometimes as the debaters clump up at the end of a session, some will join the defender's side thinking that that is the right position. Very often these groups are what you see in the video recordings. Also, you will see images of the examinations. People sit for an examination either to prove their competence so they can move to the next level of study, or because they are taking a final examination at the end of the program of studies. The person being examined is in the role of the defender, wearing the tall hat of a monk. Okay, so they're wearing the yellow, one, which is yellow in the Galupa order. Here again, at least in theory, or at least at the beginning, there is one person who sits for the examination, and all the others sit in rows in front of the defender or the examinee. Sometimes there may be two or more examinees sitting together as defenders, and they may be challenged individually or together. For the exams, eventually others will join with the challenger, but in this setting it is less frequent for others to join with the defender who is actually taking an exam. We know why. Okay. Whether in a regular debate or in an examination, the usual procedure is that the challenger approaches the defender with a question. The defender gives an answer, and the challenger then presents consequences of the defender's position that seem to oppose that view. The challengers cannot lose the debate, mainly because they do not take a stance on the question. Rather, they just draw out the consequences of the defender's statements. They are responsible for giving fair consequences of the defender's position, and if they don't, the debate cannot proceed. On the other hand, the defender is the one who can lose the debate because the debate begins with the defender staking out a position and being held responsible for it. The defender loses the debate by contradicting his or her earlier statements. The challenger points out this contradiction to the defender by clapping palms up, shouting, "Sa!" meaning finished, which indicates that the defender's earlier thesis is finished. You might hear this several times as the debate goes along. As the defender contradicts several statements in a particular line of reasoning. When the challenger shouts "sa" 3 times, that means that the defender has contradicted the basic thesis in the debate, and that is the end of the debate. He lost. As George Dreyfus reported, so the whole exercise really rests on one person taking positions, and the other person trying to show contradictions. That kind of training obviously involves an enormous ability to take a critical look at any kind of idea just for the sake of debate. Okay, so for people who like to find flaws, this is great for you. Instead of picking at, the flaws of other people's character and little things they did and didn't do, if you want to pick at faults, you debate. And, because that's your job if you're the challenger, is to pick out the faults of the defender, and really go at them. You will know that your opponent is giving up and feels that the debate is lost, not only by his or her open admission of contradiction, but also by signs shown in body language. The defender starts crying. No, here it says the defender will start smiling, perhaps laughing lightly, looking around, and maybe even bringing up other topics. So it's like, okay, I know I lost. As practiced in Tibetan monasteries and nunneries, the preferred setting for debates is outside summer and winter. Khenzer Yeshe Thupten said that he found some advantages for the clapping, even in extreme weather. He said that in the summer, especially in the exile communities in India, because it is so warm, you get a really loud clap. And in the winter, because it is so dry and your skin cracks, you get blood when you clap. Of course, as we all imagine, Tibet can be very cold in the winter. Lati Rinpoche recalled from his days as a boy in the monastery back in Tibet that the place where they debated at Shartse College of Ganden Monastery was a riverbed, and it was covered with little pebbles. He said that as they were debating hour after hour, they would put these little pebbles in their mouths to make them wet, and then stack them up row by row to let the saliva freeze in the cold air to make little pillars and pyramids. Boys will be boys. So you're having a real insight into the lives of a geshe. But my teachers, when they would talk about being young, they would all talk about how naughty they were. Yeah, and getting into all kinds of mischief and doing all sorts of stuff. Reflecting the Buddhist affirmation of there being just 2 types of consciousnesses as the sources of reliable cognition, the debaters are not allowed to read books on the debating courtyard or even to bring them there. So can you imagine we would be debating no books, no tablets, no computers, Because in our society, you're smart if you know how to look something up and find the answer to your question. Yeah, you don't have to remember things. You just have to remember how to find the answer. Okay? But there you have to actually remember what you learned and, be able to call it up in the middle of the debate. And you can't look it up, It's like you're the defender and the challenger says, how many kinds of whatever there are, and you know there's 5 and you can remember 3. and you can't say, hey, wait a minute, and pull out your phone and look up the other two, okay? And you'll feel very embarrassed if you can't remember all of them. So they actually use this thing of embarrassment to get you to study. Yeah. So they use it very much to inspire you to learn, because your teachers will embarrass you, and if they don't, your fellow students on the debate ground will embarrass you. Here, if we don't know the answer and our teacher calls on us, we think the teacher is mean and deliberately trying to embarrass us. We don't see it as, a kindness that should invigorate us to learn. We don't see it as, I'm embarrassed because I didn't prepare for the class. But I'm embarrassed, and it's the teacher's fault for embarrassing me because they know I didn't know the answer and they called on me. Isn't it strange the way we think, how we make everything somebody else's fault? Yeah, it's never our responsibility. Okay, you know what you know, not what you can access, search, and find. There is a joke among debaters that if a person has studied a topic and knows where to find the information in a text or in their notes, but is not able to explain it from their own understanding, then that person has their learning in a box where the books are stored. In other words, they have a wise mouth. Well, they don't even have a wise mouth here. They can't say it. Nowadays, it seems that most everybody in the world has their learning in a box. That is, in these magic boxes, phones and computers that we carry around. Of course, since stable knowledge does not just arise spontaneously, the debaters begin with memorization of the definitions, divisions, illustrations, and even whole texts. Yeah, so this is a big thing. Everybody memorizes. You get up in the morning, and the first thing you do is memorize and recite what you learned the next day, and then before you go to bed every night, you're reciting what you learned that morning. So everybody memorizes, and you have to be able to call up what you've memorized. And it's very helpful to know these things by heart, really. And I was saying it last week, I think, too, about how the ability to memorize is a very highly regarded quality, in the monasteries. And if you can memorize a lot, people think you're really smart. Yeah. And sometimes in the exams, when they have the exams, there's a picture further on in the book, with the big lamas in the front and all the monks on the side, and you have to stand in the middle and, recite this big long text from memory, speaking very fast. You're going, and you have to be able to do it without missing one word. And there's others in there who have it memorized too, and they're checking what you say. And if you forget something, you could tell sometimes somebody forgets something. They're searching for the word, what comes next, and then they find it. Okay. Okay, so they create their own internal databases over which they have instant control. Beyond that, they also get instructions from senior scholars, study on their own, and then take it to the classroom of the debating courtyard. The daily schedule of the monasteries that have been reestablished in India includes 2 hours of debate in the morning and 2 hours in the evening after dinner, although advanced classes may extend these sessions. Okay, so it's a lot of hours of debate, but it really is amazing. If you memorize things, and to debate, you really have to memorize all the divisions and all the categories and the illustrations and so forth, because if you don't have that, information at the tip of your tongue, and somebody asks you a question, you're like, duh. Yeah. The monks and nuns in Tibetan orders practicing debate begin with a few basic, solidly established forms of reasoning, and then use those basics to study within a well-developed program, working up to the great texts of India, both the sutras and commentaries, but mostly the commentaries. At the end of the program of studies, in the case of monks, the successful candidate is awarded the title of Geshe. Okay, which means, Geshe means virtuous friend if you translate it, or Kalyana Mitra. Yeah. Oh, it says that here, which means virtuous friend or spiritual guide. And in the case of nuns, the successful candidate is awarded the title of Geshima, but we think it should just be a Geshi. Why add the Ma? It should just be Geshi, which means virtuous female friend. Why not just virtuous friend? The program consists of 15 or 16 classes, some lasting for 2 years each. Listed in order, these classes are arranged according to 5 quintessential topics. Okay, so first one is the collected topics of reliable cognition. Okay, so that's Dura. So that's, basically what we've been studying. Yeah, so there's 3 classes because there's 3 texts, the introductory, the middling, and the greater paths of reasoning. So this is, where you start out learning to debate about colors, and then you learn all these things, all the division of phenomena and what pervades what, and, how to set up the arguments, and you learn all of that stuff. And then the middling one is is low rig. So you'll get into the 7 types of awareness, and then primary minds and secondary and mental factors. And then the third one, Tarig, is learning all the different kinds of reasonings. So that's the third year that you do. Then you go on to perfection of wisdom. Okay, so they and usually around 5 years. Sometimes it's 7. It varies. So it's called the perfection of wisdom because it's based on the Prajnaparamita Sutras, but the explicit topic in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, of course, is wisdom and emptiness. The implicit topic is the paths and stages of the practitioners of the 3 vehicles. So actually, when they say perfection of wisdom, they're studying the implicit perfection of wisdom, the paths and stages. Okay, so here's where you get a lot of your general Buddhist knowledge, because they don't get the Lamrim in this way. In here, like I was saying before, they get Lamrim, on a special teaching when His Holiness or some High Lama gives a teaching. But here, they'll learn the 4 truths and bodhicitta and the 12 links of dependent arising, and they learn all about the different concentrations and the different realms and what practices are done by a person who is following the Sravaka vehicle, what practices are done by somebody, doing the solitary realizer vehicle, what practices are done by somebody following the bodhisattva vehicle, so you go through all that kind of stuff. Okay, then the third one is middle way or madhyamaka. So it says 2 classes. Sometimes it's extended more. It's more than 2 classes. It's usually 3, I think, for a lot of people. And so in the Perfection of Wisdom class, the main text is the Abbey Samaya or called the Ornament of Clear Realizations. In the Middle Way class, the main text is the supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way, or Madhyamika Avatara. And they also study Tsongkhapa's Lekshe Ningpo in the Middle Way class. Okay, then the fourth one is discipline or Vinaya. So 2 classes or 2 years. And then the treasury of knowledge, and that's Abhidharma, or the text is Abhidharma Kosha. So that's Vasubandhu, and that's also 2 years. In addition to these classes devoted to particular topics, senior students join one or both of the retainer classes, Karam and Laram, in which they engage in lengthy review prior to examinations for their Geshe degree. Okay, so there's different levels of Geshe. Okay, the La Rampa is the highest level, and to get the La Rampa, you debate with people from all the 3 seats, from Ganden, Drepung, and Sarah. Okay, the Karam, I think, is you debate only with people within your own monastery. Okay, and then there's some other kinds of Geshe degrees for, I don't know what it is, like if you're a tulku, there's a certain kind you get. And then, of course, nowadays they've really changed the rules. Before, in Old Tibet, you had to really study so hard to get a Geshe degree. And now they say it's much easier, that if you just stay in your class, as your class advances, you advance with your class, whether you know the material or not. So when your class graduates and becomes Geshes, you can get a Geshe degree too, And so you find many people who have gone through the Geshe program quite quickly, but that's often because, and they get their degree, but it's not the La Rampa, it's the simple Geshe degree. And often they're people who are serving the monastery, okay? And so they just stayed with their class and got their Geshe degree. So now you have to really check. Just because somebody has a Geshe degree doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Used to? How old used to?
I think when I when I came along, the Geshes were, if you had a Geshe degree, you were really learned. And I think they've changed it once they got into exile. Yeah, because Venerable Steve was explaining this to me. As long as you stay there at the monastery and you're in the class, and you get bumped up with the class. Okay. Well, what it doesn't mention here in the 5 quintessence topics is they put actually the collected topics as one of them. Usually that's like the preliminaries. That's what you do before. And so the fifth one is usually Pramnavartika. And so learning logic and reasoning. But the way they do Pramnavartika, often what they do is they do it during a semester break. So they may be doing Parchen for a while, and then there's a break time, and then they go somewhere else and do Pramnavartika together for a month or 2, and then come back and resume their Parchen studies. Buddhist debate is not a marginal phenomena in Tibetan culture, but part of the cultural focus. The basic reasoning techniques used in these studies may be applied to anything a person is interested in, but for the monks and nuns practicing debate in the Tibetan orders, it is a spiritual practice. And that's the second time he said that, and that's good that he said it more than once, because we really have to remember this, because you always have to keep in mind what you're trying to do. You're not trying to win a debate. You're not trying to be, the person who can draw the most attention to themselves for being the smartest. Yeah, you're really trying to find the truth and sharpen your mind so that in your meditation you can go directly, hit the point. Every debate session begins with praise of Manjushri, who is respected as the manifestation of the wisdom of all the Buddhas. As such, Manjushri is the special deity of debate. The goal of the debate tradition is to both broaden and deepen participants' learning, increasing their capacities so they are better able to make progress towards liberation. The defilements that stain the mind have been accumulated over countless eons, and if it is possible to remove them at all, it will take effort, sharpness, and insight. He always says, if it is possible, a lot. I wonder, huh? Yeah, but I wonder sometimes himself what he thinks. Because at one point he did talk about some things in the book, didn't he, earlier on? Maybe, yeah. Something about, he doesn't accept everything hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. Yeah, it was a question. Yeah, that's right. It was a question that has really been with him for a long time. Yeah. The environment of the monastery and the technique of debate, complete with its trappings of verbal combat, are aimed at the development of an intense and definite knowledge which they believe will destroy the enemy of ignorance. I think that's a good place to stop, because if we keep going, there's a lot more without a break. Yeah.
I had two questions. One is, he mentions what happens if the defender's position is not held and he has to pretty much submit. Mm-hmm. But if the defender continues to hold the position, and it's not refuted, then when does the challenger give up? When does it come to an end at that point?
Yeah, I think, when the challenger can't think of any other ways to attack the position, then I think they just naturally, I think they naturally move on to other topics. That's my guess. Yeah.
And what if the two debaters, since they have no texts and such with them, don't agree on what they have memorized?
Mm-hmm. Then their friends jump in, and everybody's memorized the stuff, and so if you have it memorized very well, all of your friends will remind you of what the text says.
Venerable, how are the young monks taught to memorize?
Oh, you just take your pecha, your text, and you sit down and you put your text on a little table or a rock or whatever is in front of you. And the texts are very often in verse forms. So it's da 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 da. And you use that melody and you memorize the verses. Yeah? And, if you can memorize a lot of verses in one day, you are considered smart. Mm-hmm. So you'll hear them, in the morning and the evening, and especially the little ones. They will scream at the top of their voices, and especially when some of them are, about the same place in the text. One of them will start reciting that. The other ones will join in, and they're all screaming. Yeah, like 10 or 11 at night.
I read these stories about like the Nalanda where you have the gatekeeper, you need to debate the gatekeeper to get entrance. So does that mean that the university is not for new monastics, but rather it's like a postgraduate?
Yeah. They'd always talk at Nalanda, that they have, the gatekeepers, and you had to debate with the gatekeepers in order to gain admission. I'm sure they let some of the young ones come in, because they're very aware in the monasteries that they have to train the young ones for the tradition to continue. And they're very, very committed to training the young ones. Yeah, because they really want the tradition to continue. So I would imagine that, they had a way at Nalanda or Dantapuri and something, so on, for them to let the little kids in. Also, because the younger ones carry the water, they clean the bathroom, they cook your breakfast, they serve your tea, they do the laundry. Yeah. And so you need the little monks. If you're a senior one who's going to study more, you need the little monks to help you. And it's kind of like a father-son kind of relationship, and you often stay in the same room, and and you send them out when you need something, and they go to the store and get it. And if they lie, you have to discipline them, and if they steal something, you discipline them. And yeah, you are essentially raising children. Yeah. But the children also act as the gophers. That's what we call it. Yeah. Go for this and go for that. Yeah. Because when you join the monastery now, you usually go in, you have the different kamsen that are usually by area where you were from in Tibet. When in old Tibet, it was, all the kampas stayed here, and, people stayed in their own kamsen. Also because then they could speak their own dialect there. Now in exile, the kamsens are still according to where your family is from in Tibet. Yeah, even though there may be two kids who both grow up in Hubli, but they go to different kamsens according to where their family is from in Tibet. Yeah, and so usually you have an uncle or some relative who's there, and who takes you under their wing and brings you up, and then you serve them, and yeah, organized very much like that. We have to remember when we hear these stories and everything, that may be one aspect of what's going on, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. Okay, so we read this and we get the idea. They are studying and debating from morning till night, and they're very disciplined, and everybody behaves well. Stay in a monastery for some time. They are not studying morning to night. They're young, young people. Yeah, and now there's radios. They take a nap after lunch because in India it's so hot. Yeah, so after lunch everybody sleeps, and then they wake up around, after lunch, you don't go visit anybody until like 4 o'clock at the earliest. Maybe a little earlier if you're really daring, because they're asleep. And then they stay up late, But in the heat in India, that's what they do. Yeah. And then, they get together with their friends and they talk, and, yeah, they imitate what kung fu people do. Yeah, you have all the little monks, imitating the how you do chops and kicks and things like that. They're regular people. So, we often get this idea of like this pristine, everything is completely, beyond, like that, beyond the beyond. And it's ordinary people.
I remember Geshe Wangmo saying that she really observed over all these years. She said that in New York, when I listened to her talk and went to a retreat with her, that she observed her classmates really changing over the years due to being on the debate yard every day so often. So because some people think apparently that is only intellectual and that doesn't change their mind on different levels too. And she reviews that. She said they're really changed. And the other thing is, I was comparing it while you read that through, like with my education, how much focused we had on, for example, physical training, sports, and rather less than the mental training. And how great it is to have a mind that is flexible, strong, and can memorize things, and not relying on others so much, and but rather like it was all about sports and Olympics, and you have to excel there.
That's true. In Western education, if your kid can be a sports star, yeah, that's true.